Hold her. Two security guards seized Sophie's arms before she could take another step. I didn't steal anything, she cried, struggling to keep her balance. No one came to her defense. Luxury estate director Evelyn Cross walked closer, her heels echoing across the marble floor. If you're innocent, she said with a cold smile, then stop acting like a criminal. The slap came without warning. Sophie's glasses crashed onto the floor. Blood gathered on her lower lip. Someone laughed. Someone looked away. No one dared interfere. Then a calm, icy voice cut through the silence. Take your hands off her. Every guard froze. Gabriel Moretti had arrived. 38, billionaire CEO of Moretti Holdings, secretly the most feared mafia boss in Chicago, the man whose criminal empire controlled the city's underworld with absolute authority. The guards released Sophie immediately. Without another word, Gabriel walked into the kitchen after her and quietly locked the door. Outside, his bodyguards instinctively reached for their weapons, convinced someone had attacked the most powerful man in Chicago. Inside, Gabriel's eyes settled on the fresh bruise across Sophie's face. His voice remained almost frighteningly calm. Who, he asked, gave anyone permission to touch you? No one in the Moretti estate could have imagined that this single question was about to change both their lives forever. Gabriel stood motionless for several seconds, his gaze never leaving the bruise spreading across Sophie's cheek. She quickly wiped away her tears, embarrassed that he had found her crying. I'm sorry. Yes, she whispered. I'll clean up the kitchen and go back to work. You will do no such thing. His voice remained calm, yet it carried the kind of authority that allowed no argument. Outside the locked kitchen, Marcus Reed had already arrived with the estate's senior security team. Years of serving beside Gabriel had taught him one thing. When his employer spoke that quietly, someone had made a catastrophic mistake. Gabriel unlocked the door. Marcus. Yes, sir. Nobody leaves this estate. Marcus did not ask why. Seal every entrance. Suspend all deliveries. Collect every security recording from the last 4 hours. Every hallway, every corridor, every camera. Immediately. And bring every employee to the grand hall when I say. Understood? Within seconds, the estate entered complete lockdown. The announcement spread through the mansion like wildfire. Every employee exchanged anxious glances. Some assumed a dangerous rival organization had threatened the estate. Others feared confidential business information had been leaked. Only a handful of people knew the real reason. A maid had been slapped. Meanwhile, Gabriel led Sophie into a private sitting room beside the kitchen. A first aid kit was placed on the table. I can do it myself, Sophie said softly. I know. He gently handed her a clean cloth. But today, you don't have to. She hesitated before pressing the cloth against her bleeding lip. No one had ever spoken to her with such quiet consideration after she had been humiliated. Not after school, not after failed relationships, not after years of insults disguised as jokes. She kept apologizing for causing trouble, for interrupting your work, for making everyone wait. Gabriel frowned. The person who should apologize is not sitting in this room. Those words broke something inside her. Fresh tears rolled down her face. Outside, Marcus worked with military precision. Security footage appeared, one monitor after another. The investigation unfolded minute by minute. The bracelet had never been inside Sophie's belongings. Instead, another recording revealed Evelyn Cross discreetly removing the diamond bracelet from the owner's dressing room before the inspection. A second camera captured her slipping it into a decorative vase near the employee entrance. Minutes later, she publicly accused Sophie of stealing it. Witness after witness repeated the same story. Evelyn had ordered 2 guards to restrain Sophie. When Sophie refused the humiliating search, Evelyn struck her across the face in front of dozens of employees. No one intervened. Everyone believed Evelyn acted with Gabriel's full authority. Less than an hour later, every piece of evidence pointed to exactly one conclusion. Sophie Carter had never stolen anything. She had been deliberately framed. Marcus quietly entered the sitting room. "Sir?" Gabriel looked up. "It's confirmed." Marcus placed a folder on the table. Every recording supports the same conclusion. The accusation was fabricated. Gabriel closed the folder without opening it. "I've heard enough. Gather everyone." 15 minutes later, every employee stood silently inside the grand hall. Housekeepers, chefs, gardeners, drivers, security officers, administrative staff. No one dared whisper. Evelyn Cross stood confidently near the front, convinced the investigation would only reinforce her authority. Gabriel entered without haste. His expression revealed nothing. He looked at Evelyn first. "Did you accuse Sophie Carter of theft?" "Yes." "Did you authorize security to restrain her?" "I did." "Did you strike her?" Evelyn lifted her chin. She refused to cooperate. The room became unbearably still. Gabriel finally spoke. "The investigation is complete." His voice never rose. The bracelet was planted. A wave of disbelief rippled through the crowd. The accusation was false. Evelyn's confidence vanished. "You assaulted an innocent employee. You abused your authority. You ordered unlawful restraint. You brought disgrace upon this estate." He paused only briefly. "Evelyn Cross, you're dismissed. Effective immediately." She stared at him in shock. "You can't be serious. I built order inside this estate." Gabriel's eyes remained cold. "No. You built fear." Marcus stepped forward. 2 security officers escorted Evelyn toward the exit. She continued protesting, threatening lawsuits, demanding explanations. No one responded. As the doors closed behind her, Gabriel turned toward the remaining staff. "I expect excellence. I also expect humanity. No employee in this estate will ever be humiliated because of appearance, background, position, or personal differences. If anyone believes authority grants permission to degrade another human being, you have no future working for the Moretti family. Silence filled the hall. Not fearful silence, reflective silence. Many lowered their heads. Some remembered laughing. Others remembered looking away. Their guilt was impossible to hide. Gabriel's attention shifted towards Sophie, who stood quietly near the back of the room. Justice had been served. The truth had been proven. The woman responsible had been removed forever. Yet Sophie wasn't smiling. Her trembling fingers instinctively touched the fading bruise on her face. It was no longer just today's injury. It had become every cruel nickname, every mocking laugh, every rejection. Every moment she had been made to believe that looking different meant deserving less kindness than everyone else. For the first time, Gabriel understood that exposing the truth had solved only today's injustice. The deepest wounds had been inflicted long before Sophie ever walked through the gates of the Moretti estate. The atmosphere inside the Moretti estate slowly returned to normal, at least on the surface. Employees resumed their routines. Meetings filled Gabriel's calendar once again. Luxury cars came and went through the estate gates. Visitors continued arriving with million-dollar proposals. Yet something had changed in a way no one could quite explain. Every morning, Gabriel found himself asking Marcus the same question before reviewing business reports. "Has Sophie come to work today?" Marcus answered without looking up from his tablet. "She's already been here since 6 last." Gabriel gave a small nod before moving on to the day's agenda, pretending the question had been routine. Marcus wasn't convinced. Neither was anyone else who worked closely with him. Because before the incident, Gabriel rarely noticed the household staff unless something required his direct attention. Now he seemed to notice one person in particular, not because she demanded attention. Quite the opposite. Sophie still behaved exactly as she always had. She greeted everyone with the same gentle smile. She never mentioned the investigation. She never complained about Evelyn. She thanked the security guards who had apologized to her. She even comforted a young housekeeper who couldn't stop crying after admitting she had been too frightened to intervene that day. "You don't owe me tears," Sophie told the young woman softly. "You owe yourself the courage to speak next time." The words spread quietly throughout the estate. Instead of becoming bitter, Sophie somehow became even kinder. That puzzled Gabriel more than anything. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, he walked past the laundry room on his way back from a conference call. The light inside was still on. Curious, he paused outside the half-open door. Sophie sat alone beside an industrial sewing machine. A stack of uniforms rested neatly beside her. She carefully stitched a torn sleeve before moving to another jacket with missing buttons. Her movements were practiced and patient. Marcus stepped beside Gabriel. "Those repairs aren't part of her job." Gabriel looked over. "No." Marcus shook his head. She fixes damaged uniforms after hours, so the junior staff won't have to pay replacement costs. Gabriel remained silent. Neither man entered the room. They simply watched. When Sophie finished sewing the final uniform, she neatly folded each one and left a handwritten note ready for tomorrow. No signature, no expectation of thanks. The next discovery came by accident. A young kitchen assistant collapsed during breakfast preparations after hiding a severe flu for several days. Gabriel later learned that Sophie had been quietly cooking meals for the woman's family every evening. When the assistant worried about medical bills, Sophie discreetly paid the pharmacy herself. She told the pharmacist never to mention her name. Unfortunately for her, Marcus noticed everything. He handed Gabriel another report. She used nearly half her monthly savings. Gabriel frowned. For someone she's known less than a year, Marcus nodded. She said families should help each other. Gabriel stared out the office window for a long moment. Power, influence, money. He possessed more than he could ever spend. Yet the woman earning the smallest paycheck in the mansion gave away what little she had without hesitation. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had impressed him that deeply. A few days later, Gabriel skipped breakfast again. Another overnight negotiation had stretched past 3 in the morning. Coffee seemed sufficient, or so he believed. He had barely reached his office when someone knocked. "Come in." The door opened. Sophie entered carrying a breakfast tray. Fresh fruit, toast, eggs, and tea instead of coffee. "I didn't order this." "I know." She placed the tray on his desk. "You've skipped breakfast 4 times this week." Gabriel blinked. "You've been counting?" "I've been worrying." She folded her arms. "You tell everyone here to take care of themselves, but you survive on caffeine and meetings." He almost smiled. "That's different." "No, sir, it really isn't." She pointed toward the untouched plate. 5 minutes? I have a meeting. It can wait 5 minutes. It can't. It will. The room fell silent. Marcus, standing outside the office with several executives, heard every word. He prepared himself for Gabriel's icy refusal. Instead, Gabriel sighed. "You're remarkably stubborn, I've been told." He sat down, picked up his fork, and actually ate. Marcus stared through the glass office wall in complete disbelief. One executive whispered, "Did she just order him to eat?" Marcus answered without taking his eyes off the scene. "I believe she did. And he's listening." That story spread across the estate before lunchtime. By the end of the week, everyone had noticed something else. Whenever Sophie entered a room, Gabriel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Not dramatically, not romantically, just enough for those who knew him to recognize the impossible. One rainy afternoon, Sophie walked through the main corridor, carrying freshly baked cinnamon bread for the staff lounge. The warm scent filled the hallway. Gabriel happened to pass at the same moment. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "No occasion." She smiled. "I just thought everyone deserved something nice today." She offered him a small piece. "You too." He hesitated only briefly before accepting it. After one bite, he looked at her. "This is excellent." She laughed. "My grandmother would be relieved to hear that." The sound lingered in the hallway long after she disappeared around the corner. Marcus had witnessed the entire exchange. Later that evening, while reviewing security reports, he paused at one particular camera feed. It showed Gabriel standing alone in the corridor, still holding the last piece of homemade bread, still smiling faintly to himself. Marcus leaned back in his chair. For years, those cameras had existed to protect Chicago's most feared mafia boss from enemies. Now, more often than not, Gabriel requested footage from only one area of the estate: the kitchens, the staff hallways, the employee gardens. Not because he suspected danger, because, without admitting it even to himself, he simply wanted to make sure Sophie Carter was safe. For the next several weeks, life at the Moretti estate settled into a comfortable rhythm. The bruises on Sophie's face faded. The smile she wore every day returned. To everyone around her, it seemed as though the painful incident had become nothing more than an unpleasant memory. Only Gabriel knew better. He had learned to recognize the smallest changes in her expression. Whenever someone raised their voice unexpectedly, Sophie flinched before quickly pretending she hadn't. Whenever new visitors arrived at the estate, she instinctively stepped aside, making herself as invisible as possible. And whenever anyone complimented her appearance, she immediately changed the subject. It was as though accepting kindness made her uncomfortable. One afternoon, Gabriel stood in his office watching the gardens below. Sophie was outside helping two new employees carry heavy boxes toward the staff residence. She laughed when one of them nearly dropped a carton. A genuine laugh. Bright, warm, completely effortless. Yet the moment she believed no one was watching, that light disappeared. Marcus entered quietly. "You've been observing her for quite some time." Gabriel didn't deny it. I don't understand." Marcus followed his gaze toward the garden. "She smiles so easily, but she never looks peaceful." Marcus hesitated before answering. "There are some wounds that don't disappear when the bruises do." Gabriel turned toward him. "You know something." Marcus nodded slowly. "I didn't investigate her because you ordered me to. I investigated because I wanted to understand why someone so kind expects so little from life." He placed a slim folder on Gabriel's desk. "There wasn't much. She keeps almost nothing about herself online, but I found enough." Gabriel opened the folder. The first photograph showed Sophie nearly 15 years earlier. She was in college. Her smile looked almost identical. The comments written beneath the image were not. "Too fat for the dance team. She'd be pretty if she lost 50 a little bit." "Who's going to date her?" Gabriel's jaw tightened. Marcus continued quietly. "That wasn't an isolated incident. Those comments followed her through most of her 20s. Another document described her first engagement. Gabriel read every line without speaking. Sophie had once been engaged to a successful financial consultant named Daniel Brooks. Their wedding had been planned, the venue reserved, the invitations printed. Then everything collapsed. According to several statements gathered during Marcus's investigation, Daniel had ended the relationship after attending a business event where colleagues mocked Sophie's appearance. One witness remembered his exact words. "I can't build the future I want if people keep laughing at the woman beside me." Gabriel closed his eyes briefly. Did he actually say that? Marcus nodded. More than one person confirmed it. Gabriel looked back at the folder. There were no dramatic scandals, no betrayal involving money, no violence, just relentless humiliation. Quiet, persistent. Year after year. Marcus handed him another page. This one surprised me. It contained copies of several rejected job applications, excellent references, outstanding performance reviews, years of experience. Yet interview notes repeatedly included comments that had nothing to do with her qualifications. Not suitable for front-facing hospitality. Image does not match luxury brand. Would not represent company standards. None of them mentioned her work ethic. None questioned her abilities. They simply judged what they saw. Gabriel slowly set the papers aside. So, every time someone told her she wasn't good enough, Marcus finished the sentence. They weren't talking about her work. They were talking about her body. Silence settled over the office. Gabriel had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, ended conflicts between rival criminal organizations, made decisions that affected thousands of employees. Problems always had solutions. Money, strategy, influence, authority. There was always something he could do. This felt different. He couldn't erase 15 years of cruel words. He couldn't undo abandoned dreams. He couldn't return the confidence that had been stolen one insult at a time. For perhaps the first time since becoming head of the Moretti organization, Gabriel felt powerless. Later that evening, he found Sophie alone in the greenhouse, trimming herbs for the kitchen. The soft scent of rosemary and basil filled the warm air. She looked up and smiled. "Good evening, Mr. Moretti." "Gabriel." She blinked. "I'm sorry. When we're not in meetings, you can call me Gabriel." She laughed nervously. "I don't think I could." "Why not?" "Because you're my employer." And because she searched for the right words. "I've spent my whole life trying not to overstep." He studied her face. Even something as simple as using his first name felt impossible to her. Not because she lacked confidence in her manners, because somewhere along the way, she'd learned that she should always take up less space than everyone else. He changed the subject. "The herbs look healthy. They're stubborn." She smiled, gently touching a sprig of thyme. "They keep growing even after difficult weather." Gabriel looked at the small green leaves, then back at Sophie. So do you. For a brief moment, she didn't know how to respond. No one had ever compared her resilience to strength. People usually admired her kindness or pitied her circumstances. Strength had never entered the conversation. She lowered her eyes. I don't always feel strong. I know. He answered so quietly that she almost missed it. You don't have to feel strong every day to be one. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Outside, evening sunlight filtered through the greenhouse windows, casting gentle patterns across the floor. There was no dramatic confession, no sweeping declaration, only a quiet understanding growing between two people who had lived very different lives. One possessed enough power to make an entire city tremble. The other had spent years believing she deserved to disappear into the background. Yet, standing together among the herbs and flowers, Gabriel realized something that unsettled him more than any business negotiation ever had. The slap Evelyn delivered had not destroyed Sophie. It had merely reopened wounds the world had been inflicting for years. And for the first time in his life, the man everyone believed could solve any problem understood that some battles could not be won through power alone. Some hearts healed only when someone patiently reminded them, day after day, that they had always been worthy of love. Nearly 4 months passed. By then, the incident involving Evelyn Cross had become little more than a cautionary story shared among new employees. The Moretti estate felt different now. People greeted one another more warmly. Junior staff no longer feared asking questions. Employee appreciation programs had quietly expanded under Gabriel's direction, though he never accepted credit for them. If anyone deserved the gratitude, he believed, it was Sophie. Without realizing it, she had changed the culture of an entire household. When Moretti Holdings announced its annual charity gala benefiting youth education and employee assistance programs, preparations began weeks in advance. The event would host business leaders, politicians, philanthropists, and media from across Chicago. Everything had to be flawless. Gabriel surprised everyone by making an unexpected request. I'd like Sophie to help coordinate the hospitality team. The executive committee exchanged brief glances. Not because they questioned her ability, but because such a responsibility had traditionally belonged to senior corporate staff. Marcus simply nodded. If that's your decision, sir. It is. When Sophie received the assignment, she looked genuinely alarmed. There must be someone more qualified. Gabriel shook his head. There may be people with more experience, but not many with more heart. His answer left her speechless. Over the following weeks, Sophie worked tirelessly. She personally welcomed volunteers, helped decorate the ballroom, sampled menus with the catering team, made certain every staff member, from waiters to receptionists, felt appreciated. Instead of giving orders, she asked questions. Instead of demanding perfection, she offered encouragement. People found themselves working harder simply because they didn't want to disappoint her. On the evening of the gala, the grand ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Elegant music drifted through the air. Guests arrived wearing designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Television cameras documented every arrival. Sophie's black evening uniform was simple compared to the luxury surrounding her, yet it fit perfectly. For the first time in years, she looked into a mirror without immediately criticizing herself. She wasn't trying to become someone else. She simply wanted to do her job well. Marcus noticed Gabriel watching from across the ballroom. "You're supposed to be greeting investors." "I know, but your eyes are somewhere else." Gabriel allowed himself the faintest smile. "I trust the investors." Marcus followed his gaze. "You worry about her." Gabriel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The evening progressed smoothly. Donations exceeded expectations. Guests praised the organization. The atmosphere was warm, sophisticated, and relaxed. Then everything changed. A wealthy real estate investor named Richard Langford paused near the refreshment table. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Sophie. Recognition flashed across his face. "You." She politely smiled. "Good evening, sir." "I remember you." His voice grew louder. "Aren't you that maid from the scandal?" Several nearby conversations stopped. Sophie kept her composure. There was a misunderstanding that has already been resolved. "Oh, I remember the headlines." He stepped closer. "The maid accused of stealing jewelry," she answered calmly. "I was proven innocent." Richard laughed dismissively. "So they said." Before she could move away, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. The grip wasn't violent, but it was deliberate, possessive, humiliating. "You clean houses, don't you? So what exactly are you doing among Chicago's elite?" Several guests turned toward the confrontation. Sophie gently tried to free her hand. "Please, let go." Instead, his fingers tightened. "I suppose every glamorous party needs entertainment." His smile grew cruel. Or perhaps they just needed someone to remind the guests what doesn't belong. A nervous silence spread across the ballroom. Richard looked her up and down without shame. The fat maid actually thought she belonged among successful people. The words struck harder than any slap. The music seemed to disappear. The elegant ballroom blurred before Sophie's eyes. Suddenly, she wasn't standing beneath crystal chandeliers. She was back in high school, listening to classmates laugh as they refused to let her join group photos. She was standing beside her former fiancé, as strangers whispered behind their backs. She was sitting through job interviews, where polite smiles hid immediate rejection. Years of humiliation crashed into the present all at once. Her breathing became shallow. She lowered her head instinctively, hoping to disappear before anyone noticed the tears gathering in her eyes. Around them, dozens of influential guests watched. Some looked uncomfortable. Others avoided eye contact. A few whispered quietly to one another. No one stepped forward. Not yet. At the opposite end of the ballroom, Gabriel had been preparing to begin his keynote address. An executive was introducing him to the audience. Applause had already started. Then he saw it. Richard's hand gripping Sophie's wrist. The shame on her face. The silence of everyone surrounding them. Gabriel didn't wait for the introduction to finish. Without saying a single word, he stepped away from the stage. Every camera instinctively turned to follow him. The applause faded into complete silence. Hundreds of eyes watched Chicago's most powerful businessman walk directly toward the frightened woman, standing alone in the center of the ballroom. No one knew what he was about to do. The ballroom was so quiet that the sound of Gabriel's footsteps echoed across the polished marble floor. Every guest watched him. Executives who negotiated billion-dollar mergers, politicians accustomed to commanding entire rooms, journalists searching for tomorrow's headlines. None of them spoke. They simply stepped aside as Gabriel Moretti crossed the ballroom with the calm certainty of a man who never needed to announce his authority. Richard Langford still held Sophie's wrist. Only when Gabriel stopped directly before them did Richard finally release it. He forced an awkward smile. "Mr. Moretti, I didn't realize you weren't speaking to me." Gabriel's voice remained perfectly controlled. He turned toward Sophie first. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head automatically. "Nanez?" "No." But her trembling hands told a different story. Without hesitation, Gabriel gently took her hand in his own. Not possessively, not dramatically, simply offering the steady reassurance she had been denied only moments before. "You don't have to stand here alone." For a second, Sophie closed her eyes. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed someone to say those words. Gabriel, then Richard. His expression revealed neither anger nor impatience, only absolute certainty. "You publicly insulted one of my employees." Richard attempted a laugh. "It was only a joke." "No," Gabriel replied. "It was humiliation. Not the same thing." Richard straightened his jacket. "I believe you're taking this too personally." "I commented on a maid." Gabriel's gaze hardened. "You commented on a human being." A murmur spread through the audience. No one interrupted. No one dared. Gabriel slowly turned away from Richard and looked across the ballroom. The master of ceremonies still stood beside the podium, uncertain what to do. Gabriel stepped onto the stage without waiting for an introduction. Every camera immediately focused on him. He looked at the audience before speaking. "I prepared a keynote tonight." He paused. "I won't be giving it." Confused whispers rippled through the room. "Instead, I'd like to tell you a true story." His eyes found Sophie once more. "Several months ago, an employee inside my home was falsely accused of theft. The accusation was fabricated. Evidence was planted, and while innocent, she was publicly restrained, publicly humiliated, and struck across the face." Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Many guests had heard vague rumors. Very few knew the truth. Gabriel continued. The investigation concluded within 1 hour. The employee was completely innocent. The individual responsible was immediately dismissed. He allowed the silence to settle. But justice on paper doesn't erase humiliation. It doesn't erase years of being told that your appearance determines your value. His voice remained measured. Yet every word carried unmistakable weight. The woman standing here tonight is Sophie Carter. For 3 years, she has quietly served the Moretti estate. She has repaired uniforms that weren't her responsibility, cooked meals for sick co-workers, paid medical expenses for employees who could not afford treatment, stayed after hours without asking for recognition, never once expecting applause. He looked toward the staff members standing along the ballroom walls. Many of you know these things. Several employees nodded through tear-filled eyes. Gabriel faced the audience again. I certainly know them, because true character reveals itself when no one is watching. He descended from the stage and stopped beside Sophie once again. I invited her to help organize this gala, not because she needed charity, but because she earned my trust. Applause began somewhere near the back of the ballroom. One pair of hands, then another. Within seconds, the entire hospitality staff stood clapping. The executives followed. Soon, hundreds of guests rose to their feet. The applause rolled across the ballroom like thunder. Sophie stared around the room in disbelief. The same kind of crowd that had once made her feel invisible was now standing because of her. Tears filled her eyes once more. Not from shame, from relief. When the applause finally settled, Gabriel turned toward Richard Langford. Our partnership ends tonight. Richard's confident smile disappeared. I'm sure we can discuss this privately. There is nothing to discuss. Gabriel's tone remained calm. Effective immediately, every investment agreement involving Langford Development is terminated. Our charitable foundation will no longer accept your sponsorship. Every pending negotiation is cancelled. You will not receive another invitation to a Moretti event. Richard's face drained of color. You can't do this over one misunderstanding. Gabriel answered without hesitation. I can, and I have. He looked directly into Richard's eyes. If someone measures another person's worth by appearance, I have no interest in building a future with them. Marcus stepped forward. The legal documentation will be delivered before midnight. Richard glanced around desperately. No one defended him. Several executives quietly stepped away. A politician who had been speaking with him moments earlier politely excused himself. Business partners who once competed for his attention suddenly found urgent conversations elsewhere. For the first time that evening, Richard understood what true isolation felt like. Not because someone had shouted at him, because every ounce of respect he believed he possessed had disappeared in complete silence. Gabriel never looked back at him. Instead, he turned once more to Sophie. The ballroom had grown quiet again. You belong here, he said softly. You always did. Her lips trembled. I've never believed that. I know. He smiled gently, but perhaps he glanced around at the hundreds of people still standing. It's time you began. This time, the applause returned stronger, longer, not for Chicago's most powerful mafia boss, not for the billionaire who controlled an empire, but for the woman who had spent her entire life believing she was too much to be loved, only to discover that kindness, dignity, and quiet courage were qualities no amount of cruelty could ever diminish. The charity gala became the most talked about event in Chicago for reasons no one had expected. News outlets praised the record-breaking donations. Business magazines highlighted Gabriel Moretti's uncompromising leadership. But among employees, only one moment truly mattered. The moment he had crossed an entire ballroom, not for an investor, a politician, or a celebrity, but for a maid everyone else had overlooked. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. Yet something between Gabriel and Sophie had quietly changed. Neither of them mentioned the gala. Neither pretended it hadn't happened. Instead, their conversations became easier, longer, more natural. Some mornings, Sophie still insisted he eat breakfast before his meetings. He complained with little enthusiasm. She ignored every excuse. Marcus eventually stopped preparing reminders for Gabriel's meals. "There isn't much point anymore," he told one of the assistants. "Miss Carter has that responsibility well under control." One evening, after an especially demanding week, Sophie carried a basket of fresh bread toward the employee residence. The estate gardens were nearly empty. The sun had begun to disappear behind the trees, painting the sky in warm shades of gold and crimson. She found Gabriel sitting alone beside the small lake at the edge of the property. His phone rested beside him. For once, he wasn't answering emails. He wasn't reviewing contracts. He was simply watching the water. "I thought I'd find you here," Sophie said gently. He looked up. "You were looking for me." She held up the basket. "I baked too much." A faint smile appeared. "You always bake too much." "I always hope people eat too much." That earned a quiet laugh. She sat beside him, leaving enough space to remain respectful, yet close enough that silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The breeze stirred the surface of the lake. Birdsong echoed from the distant trees. It was Sophie who finally broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything?" "Why did you do all of that?" He turned toward her. "The investigation?" She shook her head. "No." "The gala?" "You could have handled it privately. You could have ignored it. You could have protected your reputation." Her voice grew softer. "But instead, you protected mine." Gabriel looked across the water before answering. "I've spent most of my life solving problems. Business problems, security problems, conflicts, negotiations. I always believed there was an answer for everything." He paused. "Then I met you." Sophie's expression became uncertain. "You made me realize there are wounds that can't be negotiated away. They can't be purchased. They can't be erased by power." She lowered her eyes. The slap wasn't even the worst part. His attention immediately returned to her. What was? For several seconds, she couldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The silence. A tear slipped down her cheek. Being hit hurt, but hearing everyone say nothing, that hurt far more. She clasped her hands together tightly. I kept thinking, if nobody defended me, maybe everyone secretly believed I deserved it. Gabriel's chest tightened. Years of loneliness, years of rejection, condensed into one heartbreaking confession. I know it sounds foolish. It doesn't. She laughed weakly through her tears. I've spent so many years trying to become someone people could accept. I lost weight. I gained it back. I bought different clothes. I changed my hair. I tried speaking more softly, taking up less space. I kept thinking, if I could become just a little more acceptable, maybe someone would finally choose me. Her shoulders trembled. But somehow, I was always still too much. Gabriel slowly reached toward her. Not hurriedly, not dramatically. He gently brushed away the tears from her cheeks with the back of his fingers. Then, with quiet care, he cupped her face. The same face the world had taught her to hide. The same face she had spent years believing was unworthy of admiration. He looked directly into her eyes. I can't change your past. His voice was steady. I can't erase every cruel word. I can't undo every rejection. I wish I could. He took a slow breath. But I can promise you something. She searched his face. As long as I'm beside you, no one will ever make you believe you're worth less than anyone else again. The evening air fell completely still. Sophie's tears flowed freely now. Not from pain, but because she believed him. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she truly believed him. Gabriel smiled softly. There's something else I should have said a long time ago. She waited. I didn't fall in love with you because you needed protection. Her breath caught. I fell in love with you because, after everything people did to you, you still chose kindness. You still believed other people deserved compassion. You still baked birthday cakes. You still paid strangers' medical bills. You still smiled at people who barely noticed you. He shook his head in quiet amazement. I've met powerful people, wealthy people, brilliant people, but I've never met anyone stronger than you. Sophie's hands slowly rose to cover his. No one, she whispered, has ever looked at me the way you're looking at me now. Then let me be the first. She laughed through tears, a fragile, beautiful laugh that carried years of healing within it. Without another word, she leaned forward. Gabriel met her halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, unhurried, not born from passion alone, but from trust, respect, patience, and two hearts that had quietly found their way home. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie rested her forehead against his. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. Gabriel smiled. I do. She looked up. It looks a lot brighter than yesterday. For the first time in her life, Sophie Carter allowed herself to believe that perhaps love had never been waiting for her to become someone else. Perhaps it had simply been waiting for someone who could finally see her exactly as she already was. 6 months later, the Moretti organization looked very different. Not because of a new business strategy, not because of another successful acquisition, but because the people inside it had begun treating one another differently. What had started with one act of courage had quietly transformed an entire company culture. Under Gabriel's direction, a new department had been established across every Moretti business. Its purpose was simple: to make sure every employee felt safe, respected, and heard. When Gabriel announced the person who would lead the initiative, not a single employee seemed surprised. Sophie Carter. Her official title was Director of Employee Care. She accepted the position with the same humility she had shown as a maid. "I've never managed a department before," she admitted during her first leadership meeting. Gabriel smiled. "You've been leading people for years. You simply never had the title, Tuomo Tsuom." The department quickly became one of the organization's greatest successes. Confidential counseling services were introduced for employees facing emotional hardship. Emergency family assistance funds helped workers through unexpected medical crises. Anti-bullying policies were strengthened and enforced without exception. New mentorship programs welcomed young employees who often felt intimidated during their first months. Sophie also launched body confidence workshops for women and men who had spent years believing they were somehow less than because they didn't fit society's expectations. Attendance exceeded every prediction. Stories once hidden in silence finally found a safe place to be shared. Employees often said the same thing afterward. "For the first time, I feel seen." On the morning of the department's official opening ceremony, reporters gathered outside Moretti Holdings' headquarters. Business leaders praised the initiative. Community organizations offered partnerships. Even rival corporations expressed interest in adopting similar programs. As cameras flashed, Sophie stood beside Gabriel at the entrance. She wore a tailored navy suit instead of a maid's uniform. Nothing about her warmth had changed, only the confidence with which she carried it. Marcus watched from nearby with quiet satisfaction. Months earlier, he had worried that Gabriel's concern for Sophie might distract him from leading an empire. Instead, it had made him a better leader, a better man. During the press conference, one journalist raised a hand. "Mr. Moretti, may I ask a personal question?" Gabriel nodded. "When did you know Miss Carter was the woman you wanted to spend your life with?" The crowd fell silent. Sophie looked at him with curious eyes. She had never asked him that question herself. Gabriel smiled, not toward the cameras, but toward her. "I knew the moment I saw someone raise a hand against her." The room remained completely still. Not because she needed saving. He reached for Sophie's hand, gently intertwining his fingers with hers. "But because I realized something no one else seemed willing to see." He looked at the audience. The world had spent years convincing an extraordinary woman that she deserved less love simply because she looked different. His voice was calm, yet every word carried unmistakable conviction. I decided that if I had the power to change even one person's story, I wanted hers to be the first. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. They were no longer tears of shame, nor were they tears of fear. They were the quiet tears of someone who had finally stopped fighting against her own reflection. She squeezed his hand. I used to think being loved meant becoming someone else, she said softly. I know now. She smiled through those tears. The right person simply helps you see the value that was already there. The audience responded with warm applause. Not because they were witnessing a billionaire's love story, not because one of Chicago's most powerful men had spoken from the heart, but because they had watched two people transform pain into compassion, authority into kindness, and protection into partnership. As the ceremony concluded, employees gathered around Sophie to congratulate her. Many thanked her for changing their lives. Others simply embraced her. She accepted every hug with the same gentle smile she had worn years earlier while quietly baking birthday cakes in the mansion kitchen. Only now she no longer believed those small acts of kindness were all she had to offer. Walking toward the building entrance, Gabriel glanced at her. Ready to go to work, Director Carter? She laughed. Only if you'll remember to eat breakfast. He pretended to sigh. I suppose I don't have much choice. You never really did. They walked inside together, hand in hand, not because she needed someone to rescue her, and not because he needed someone to complete him, but because love had taught them both the same enduring truth. The strongest hearts are not the ones that never break. They are the ones that choose kindness even after they do.